Who raised you more, your parents, your grandparents, or someone else?
Picture this moment unfolding in all its raw intensity, where you're seated at a grand dining table overflowing with the scents of roasted turkey, buttery mashed potatoes, and sweet pumpkin pie during a Thanksgiving gathering that should have been about gratitude, but instead spirals into a humiliating confrontation. As your son's new wife delivers a cutting remark about your appearance that sends her entire family into fits of laughter so uncontrollable they nearly choke on their food, only for the atmosphere to shatter completely when her father suddenly recognizes you not as the overlooked mother-in-law, but as a formidable executive from the prestigious Redwood Group, leaving everyone frozen in stunned silence and propelling the evening toward revelations that no one anticipated, drawing you deeper into a web of family tensions, professional intrigue, and the simmering promise of retribution that keeps the heart racing long after the plates are cleared. I had driven through the crisp autumn chill of suburban Connecticut that evening, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual as I approached the imposing colonial home of the Hargrove family. A place that exuded the kind of old-money confidence built from generations of real estate deals and country club memberships, reflecting the aspirations of so many middle-class Americans chasing that elusive American dream while I, Elena Vasquez, a widow in my late 50s who had risen through the ranks at Redwood Group from a junior analyst in Queens to overseeing multi-million-dollar acquisitions, felt a familiar mix of pride and vulnerability settling in my chest because hosting holidays had always been my domain back in my modest Brooklyn brownstone. But stepping into this territory as Miguel's mother for the first time meant navigating uncharted waters where judgments about everything from my simple black dress to the extra curves I'd carried since my husband's passing could turn the festive mood sour before the first toast. Sophia, my son Miguel's bride of just 6 months, welcomed me at the door with an embrace that felt more obligatory than warm, her lithe figure clad in a cashmere sweater and pearls that whispered of privilege. And she guided me inside where the living room already hummed with the voices of her relatives mingling over crystal glasses of Chardonnay, including her parents Richard and Lydia Hargrove, her brother Ethan with his perpetual smirk, and a handful of cousins whose laughter carried the easy entitlement of those who had never questioned their place at the table, prompting me to smile through the introductions while Richard shook my hand with a grip that assessed rather than greeted, and Lydia complimented my earrings in a tone that suggested surprise at my having anything noteworthy, all of which I absorbed with the practiced poise of someone who had faced down skeptical board members for decades, determined to let the evening reveal itself without me dominating the narrative right away. We eventually migrated to the dining room, where the mahogany table sagged under the weight of culinary masterpieces prepared by a caterer, no doubt, from golden-crusted stuffing to cranberry relish glistening like jewels. And as wine glasses clinked and stories flowed about everything from the latest NFL upsets to booming property markets in the tri-state area, I contributed thoughtfully about industry trends without unveiling my executive status, preferring to observe how Sophia positioned herself next to Miguel like a queen on her throne, her comments laced with subtle barbs about urban life versus their idyllic suburbia that made me wonder if she viewed me as an intruder from a less polished world. Yet I responded with anecdotes from my early motherhood days, like the time Miguel and I improvised a Thanksgiving with canned goods after a budget crunch, turning potential awkwardness into moments of shared humanity that drew nods and chuckles from the group, fostering a fragile sense of inclusion amid the opulence. Dessert arrived with fanfare, plates of pie distributed amid compliments to Lydia's recipe book collection, but the mood shifted abruptly when Sophia, emboldened perhaps by her third glass of Merlot and the approving glances from her family, leaned forward with a gleam of mischief in her eyes that masked something sharper, pointing at me across the table and declaring in a voice dripping with false pride, "This is the fat pig we have to tolerate," the words slicing through the air like a poorly aimed arrow that struck its target nonetheless, igniting an explosion of laughter from her relatives so raucous that Lydia coughed violently into her napkin while Ethan pounded the table and Richard's shoulders shook with mirth, their collective amusement building on itself in a vicious cycle that isolated me there with my fork hovering over untouched pie, the heat of embarrassment mingling with a deeper anger at how such casual cruelty echoed the body-shaming insecurities many women of my age battle quietly in a society obsessed with youth and slimness, and even Miguel, seated beside her, offered only a weak protest about it being a joke gone too far. His discomfort evident, but his silence in the moment speaking volumes about the dynamics he had stepped into. The laughter died as abruptly as it had erupted when Richard's expression transformed mid-chuckle, his eyes locking onto mine with a dawning horror that drained the color from his face, and he muttered in disbelief, "Oh my God. You're the executive from Redwood Group," the recognition hanging in the air like a thunderclap, causing forks to drop and conversations to halt as every pair of eyes turned toward me, piecing together the implications of my identity in a company whose decisions could reshape fortunes in the real estate world they all navigated, and in that suspended silence, I maintained my composure, setting down my napkin deliberately. While Richard stammered an invitation to discuss a potential collaboration in his study after the meal, his tone evolving from jovial host to eager petitioner in the span of seconds, revealing the undercurrents of ambition that had likely prompted this entire gathering. As coffee was poured and the group dispersed uneasily, with Sophia's glare boring into me like daggers and Miguel pulling me aside to apologize profusely for the discomfort, I excused myself to the powder room to collect my thoughts, splashing water on my face and staring into the mirror at the woman who had survived worse than family barbs, corporate takeovers, personal losses, the grind of single parenting, and emerging with a resolve that this slight would not define the night but rather catalyze a response measured and memorable. Though as I rejoined them in the hallway, catching Richard's furtive glance at the business card I'd left on the side table earlier, a subtle clue to his desperation flickered in my mind, leaving me to contemplate whether his overture stemmed from genuine opportunity or a calculated ploy to leverage family ties, and how I might turn the tables in a way that satisfied the sting without fracturing the bonds Miguel held dear. The uncertainty coiling tighter as the evening stretched on into conversations laced with newfound respect and underlying tension that promised complications far beyond the dessert course. Stirring awake in the opulent guest room of the Hargrove estate as the first rays of November sunlight pierced through the heavy brocade curtains, casting elongated shadows across the four-poster bed that felt more like a stage set for discomfort than a place of rest, I lay there for a moment replaying the previous night's humiliating crescendo in my mind, not allowing the sting of Sophia's cruel label to fester unchecked, but instead channeling it into a quiet determination to reclaim the narrative during this extended family weekend that Miguel had insisted upon to smooth over marital edges, knowing full well that as a seasoned executive who'd negotiated hostile takeovers at Redwood Group without flinching, I could turn this personal slight into an opportunity for subtle empowerment without descending into the pettiness that might alienate my son further from his new roots. Miguel appeared at my door shortly after 8, his knock tentative as if testing the waters of my forgiveness. And when I invited him in, he perched on the edge of an armchair looking every bit the conflicted young man in his mid-30s who'd traded his freelance artist's uncertainty for the stability of Sophia's world, offering apologies laced with excuses about her wine-fueled impulsiveness and the Hargrove's tradition of ribbing newcomers to build camaraderie. To which I responded by pulling him into a reassuring embrace and sharing a light-hearted memory of my own youthful faux pas during a family barbecue back in Queens where I'd accidentally doused the grill with soda instead of lighter fluid, eliciting his chuckle and easing the tension enough that we descended together to the kitchen where the aroma of fresh brewed coffee and sizzling bacon already mingled with the undercurrent of unspoken regrets from the dinner table. Lydia moved about the granite island with efficient grace, flipping pancakes onto a warming platter while Richard hunched over his tablet scanning stock tickers, his avoidance of my gaze speaking volumes about the professional bombshell he dropped the night before. And Sophia entered moments later looking impeccably composed in yoga pants and a fitted top that accentuated her figure in a way that seemed almost performative, her attempt at contrition manifesting as a breezy comment about how everyone says silly things after too much turkey, which I acknowledged with a nod and a quip about how my metabolism had long ago decided pies were non-negotiable. companions to holiday cheer, diffusing the awkwardness just enough to allow the group to gather in the sun-drenched breakfast nook for a spread of artisanal yogurts, seasonal fruits, and those golden pancakes drizzled with maple syrup imported from some Vermont boutique, where conversation skirted the elephant in the room by focusing on weekend plans like a hike in the nearby woods or a trip to the local antique shops, though I caught Ethan's sidelong glances laced with curiosity about the woman his family had so carelessly mocked only hours earlier. As plates emptied and second cups of coffee circulated, Ethan proposed reviving an old family tradition of a parlor game called Confessions Over Cards, a twist on charades where players drew prompts to share humorous vulnerabilities meant to foster bonds, but often serving as veiled opportunities for one-upmanship. And with the group shuffling into the adjoining family room lined with leather-bound books and a stone fireplace crackling softly, I agreed to participate, sensing it as a chance to subtly redirect the power dynamic, drawing the first card that prompted a story about overcoming a professional setback, which I spun into a tale of botching my initial presentation at Redwood by spilling coffee on the CEO's notes during a high-stakes merger discussion, turning what could have been a disaster into a promotion when my quick thinking salvaged the deal and earned me a reputation for unflappable resilience, my delivery infused with self-deprecating humor that drew genuine laughter from Miguel and even tentative smiles from Lydia, while Sophia's turn revealed her own thinly veiled insecurities through a recounting of a modeling gig gone awry due to a wardrobe malfunction that left her feeling exposed in more ways than one, exposing the fragility beneath her poised exterior in a manner that humanized her just enough to make her earlier Barb feel like a projection of her own fears rather than outright malice. Richard seized the lull to steer us toward the business conversation he'd hinted at the night before, suggesting we retire to his home office for a private overview of his eco-development venture that aligned tantalizingly with Redwood's sustainability initiatives. And as we settled around his mahogany desk cluttered with blueprints and financial projections, he launched into a polished pitch about revolutionizing suburban sprawl with green tech that promised high returns for early investors like us, his enthusiasm masking the desperation I detected in the way his fingers drummed the armrest, prompting me to probe deeper with questions about risk mitigation and market saturation that highlighted gaps in his strategy, such as over-reliance on unvetted suppliers, which I addressed not with outright rejection, but by offering a nugget of insider wisdom on how to court venture capitalists wary of family-run operations tainted by past scandals, weaving in a wry observation that first impressions in negotiations could make or break alliances faster than a poorly chosen dinner toast, the pointed reference to the previous evening's insult landing with precision as Richard's cheeks flushed and Sophia, who'd tagged along under the pretense of moral support, shifted uncomfortably in her seat, the clever jab serving as my initial revenge by humbling their collective ego without escalating to confrontation, leaving the room charged with a newfound respect tinged with unease as I excused myself mid-discussion to take a call from my assistant about an unfolding acquisition opportunity. Stepping out onto the wraparound porch where the chill air nipped at my skin and carried the faint scent of pine from the encroaching woods, I connected the line only to dive into details about a pivotal deal involving a Connecticut property tract that could intersect with Richard's ambitions, my voice carrying just far enough through the cracked window for Sophia, who had followed under some pretext, to overhear fragments about my direct sway over the board's approval process and the potential to blacklist competitors with shaky ethics, her sharp intake of breath betraying her eavesdropping as she froze in the doorway, eyes widening with the realization that the woman she dismissed so callously held the strings to their financial future, propelling me to end the call abruptly and turn to face her, the unspoken threat of exposure hanging between us like a gathering storm that hinted at alliances fracturing and secrets unraveling in ways neither of us could yet predict. Several weeks after the Thanksgiving debacle that had left lingering echoes in my daily routine as I navigated the bustling corridors of Redwood Group's headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, where deal memos piled up like autumn leaves and conference calls demanded unwavering focus, Richard Hargrove's email arrived like an unexpected sequel, extending a formal invitation to a business lunch at an upscale bistro overlooking the Hudson River, positioning it as a natural extension of his pitch while casually suggesting that Sophia and Miguel accompany us to infuse the meeting with a familial warmth that belied the underlying calculations, and though part of me bristled at the audacity of blending personal slights with professional overtures, I accepted the invitation with a measured politeness, driven by a desire to monitor how his recognition of my role might reshape their attitudes and, more crucially, to safeguard Miguel's budding marriage from the fallout of unresolved tensions that could ripple through his life like cracks in a foundation. The bistro exuded that refined elegance typical of power lunch spots catering to Wall Street types, with its crisp white linens, polished silverware glinting under soft pendant lights, and a menu boasting dishes like seared foie gras and heirloom tomato salads that screamed sophistication, prompting me to arrive 10 minutes early in a tailored pantsuit that balanced authority with approachability, settling at a corner table where I could observe the entrance and compose my thoughts amid the murmur of nearby conversations about market fluctuations and merger rumors that mirrored the undercurrents of my own situation. Richard materialized first, his stride purposeful yet laced with the subtle anxiety of a man whose empire teetered on the edge, ordering a double scotch neat despite the midday hour as a testament to his fraying nerves. And he greeted me with an effusive handshake that overcompensated for the prior evening's faux pas, launching immediately into effusive praise for Redwood's innovative portfolio while Sophia and Miguel arrived shortly thereafter, her arm linked through his in a display of unity that felt rehearsed. Her outfit a chic ensemble of silk blouse and pencil skirt that contrasted sharply with my practical attire, though she managed a tight-lipped smile as we exchanged pleasantries over the sommelier's recommendations for a crisp Sauvignon Blanc to complement the lighter fare. As appetizers circulated delicate escargot for Richard, a mixed greens salad for me that I picked it thoughtfully. The dialogue flowed from innocuous topics like the unseasonably mild winter to Miguel's latest freelance project designing logos for eco-brands, which Sophia hijacked with boasts about her burgeoning social media presence partnering with luxury wellness lines. Her enthusiasm drawing approving nods from her father, but grating against my patience as it underscored the superficiality that had fueled her dinner insult. Yet I interjected smoothly with insights from Redwood's community outreach programs that emphasized sustainable living, steering the conversation toward Richard's proposal without revealing how my team had already flagged inconsistencies in his financials during preliminary reviews. The entrees arrived with plates of pan-roasted salmon for Sophia and myself, paired with herb-infused quinoa that evoked the health-conscious facade of their family dynamic, and that's when Richard delved deeper into his venture, outlining ambitious plans for solar-integrated housing developments in upstate New York that promise to align seamlessly with federal green incentives. His projections glowing on the tablet he passed around until my probing questions about contingency funding exposed the precarious thread holding it together, particularly the abrupt withdrawal of their primary backer amid whispers of irregularities from Richard's tenure at a now-defunct investment firm, a revelation that hung in the air like an uninvited guest as his glass paused midway to his lips and Sophia's fork clattered softly against her plate. Seizing the moment to infuse a touch of levity amid the tension, I recounted a humorous anecdote from my early career at Redwood involving a rival executive whose overinflated pitch unraveled spectacularly when a simple background check revealed pilfered ideas from a smaller competitor, likening it to how even the sturdiest plans could topple under the weight of hidden baggage, my words laced with just enough pointed ambiguity to make Richard squirm while eliciting a nervous chuckle from Miguel, who seemed oblivious to the subtext but attuned to the shifting dynamics, and as Sophia excused herself abruptly to take a call, her phone's glow illuminating a text that she shielded hastily, I leaned in to offer Richard a seemingly generous olive branch by mentioning a contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission who specialized in pre-approval audits for ventures like his, suggesting that a proactive disclosure could mitigate risks before they ballooned, though in truth this tip was my witty retaliation. A calculated leak designed to prompt him to audit his own books and confront the embezzlement shadows lurking in his past without me lifting a finger to expose them outright. Saving face publicly while delivering a stinging reminder of the transparency Redwood demanded from partners, his grateful yet evasive thanks confirming that the barb had landed precisely where intended. The meal concluded with espresso and a tentative agreement to submit revised documents by month's end, but as we stepped out into the brisk afternoon air laced with the tang of the river, Miguel drew me aside near a wrought iron bench in the adjacent plaza. His expression clouded with the weight of unspoken burdens accumulated since the holidays, confessing in hushed tones that Sophia's post-dinner moods had intensified into frequent arguments over finances and her family's mounting expectations, admitting that he questioned whether this union, once envisioned as his ticket to stability, was instead eroding his sense of self and leaving him torn between loyalty to her and the comfort of our simpler past. A dilemma that pierced me deeply because advising him to persevere risked enabling toxicity, while urging separation could shatter the family he'd fought to build, pulling me inexorably into a loyalty bind where my protective instincts clashed with the hard-won wisdom of letting him navigate his own storms, especially as Richard's lingering glance back at us hinted at secrets far murkier than a botched investment, leaving the chill wind to whisper uncertainties about how far their desperation might push them and whether my interventions would heal or hasten the unraveling ahead. Entering the frosty grip of mid-February, where Valentine's Day promotions cluttered every storefront with heart-shaped indulgences that only amplified the isolation of my single status after years of widowhood, I found myself entangled in a profound internal debate about extending forgiveness to Sophia, not because her Thanksgiving slight had lost its edge, but precisely because it still cut deep, compelling me to weigh the potential salvation of Miguel's marriage against the satisfaction of unbridled retaliation, especially after his emotional confession during our post-lunch walk had illuminated the fractures in their relationship that her family's snobbery had exacerbated, making me realize that clinging to resentment might fortify my own armor yet risk pushing my son toward a divorce that could leave him adrift in the very uncertainties I'd shielded him from since his father's passing. Deciding that true strength lay in selective mercy, the kind that disarms opponents while preserving familial bonds for those who mattered most, I extended an invitation via text for a low-key Sunday dinner at my Brooklyn brownstone, framing it as a neutral space to rebuild bridges away from the Hargrove estate's intimidating grandeur. And when they accepted with a promptness that surprised me, I spent the afternoon in my cozy kitchen layering lasagna with ricotta and spinach sourced from the neighborhood market, the rhythmic grating of cheese and simmering of tomato sauce serving as a meditative counterpoint to the whirlwind of emotions churning within, determined to host an evening that blended warmth with watchful intent rather than outright confrontation. They arrived as the winter sun dipped low, casting a golden hue through my bay windows onto the eclectic mix of furniture that told stories of thrift shop finds and sentimental keepsakes, with Miguel's face lighting up at the familiar scents wafting from the oven while Sophia lingered on the threshold in a cashmere wrap over jeans that softened her usual polish, her hesitation evident as she stepped inside, and I greeted them with hugs that bridged the awkward gap, ushering them into the living room where framed photos of Miguel's childhood adventures adorned the mantel, prompting me to kick off the gathering by acknowledging the holiday tensions with a sincere admission that my own pride had amplified the fallout and that I valued their union enough to move forward, a gesture that elicited a mumbled reciprocity from Sophia about regretting her words under the pressure of familial expectations, though her averted gaze suggested the apology was more performative than heartfelt, setting a tone of tentative reconciliation as we transitioned to the dining table set with mismatched china and candles flickering softly. Conversation unfolded over the steaming lasagna and a robust Chianti that loosened tongues without excess, weaving through light topics like Miguel's recent client win in graphic design that had him beaming with pride, and Sophia's updates on her wellness blog that I praised genuinely for its empowering messages on self-acceptance. choosing to highlight the irony of her content's themes against her past behavior in a way that invited reflection without accusation, and as laughter bubbled up from shared anecdotes. Me recounting Miguel's disastrous first attempt at cooking Valentine's pancakes that resulted in a kitchen fire alarm symphony, I sensed the barriers lowering. Incrementally, though the choice to prioritize harmony over hashing out grievances might have struck observers as overly conciliatory, potentially frustrating those who craved a fiercer maternal defense. Yet it aligned with my deeper strategy of demonstrating resilience through restraint, allowing the evening to evolve into a semblance of normalcy with board games pulled from the shelf that pitted teams in trivia about pop culture and history, where Sophia's competitive streak emerged in good-natured jabs that echoed her family's dynamic but lacked the prior venom. Dessert brought tiramisu dusted with cocoa that I had prepared earlier, served alongside decaf coffee in the warmth of the kitchen island, and that's when Sophia, emboldened by the evening's relative peace, unveiled her phone to showcase a new Instagram reel titled, "Blending Families, Tips for Lasting Harmony," a glossy montage featuring clips from our lunch and vague allusions to overcoming challenging integrations with outsiders, her enthusiasm for the post's potential virality evident as she encouraged me to like and share, which I did with effusive compliments on its production value before casually recommending she tag Redwood Group's corporate social media handle to reach a broader audience interested in inclusive narratives. Knowing full well that my digital team monitored such mentions religiously and had been primed with instructions to engage by seeding comments that innocently inquired about the featured families' sustainable lifestyle ventures, a subtle orchestration that transformed her self-promotional triumph into an unintended spotlight on Richard's faltering eco-project. As notifications soon flooded her device with questions about funding timelines and ethical sourcing that veered perilously close to exposing the financial skeletons without me uttering a single incriminating word. My revenge manifesting as this ingenious digital boomerang that rebounded her snobbery back upon them, turning likes into liabilities and her smug satisfaction into wide-eyed alarm as the comment section ballooned with skeptical probes by the time we cleared the plates. As the night drew to a close with promises of future gatherings exchanged amid hugs at the door that carried a fragile authenticity, Miguel lingered to whisper his gratitude for the olive branch that had eased his burdens. His relief palpable in the way he squeezed my hand before joining Sophia in their cab, but scarcely had the taillights faded into the Brooklyn night when my own phone buzzed insistently on the side table, displaying an unknown numbers message that attached a blurred photograph of me exiting the bistro from weeks prior, accompanied by the chilling directive, "Careful where you meddle." Or, "Next time it's closer to home," the anonymous threat slicing through the evening's tentative calm like a shadow detaching from the wall, igniting a surge of adrenaline that had me double-checking locks and scanning the street for unfamiliar figures, leaving me to grapple with the horrifying possibility that this stemmed from Richard's cornered desperation, Sophia's wounded pride, or an entirely unforeseen adversary drawn into our fray. The ambiguity coiling around my thoughts like fog rolling off the East River and propelling the uncertainty into realms where safety itself hung in precarious balance. March swept in with the relentless urgency of impending tax deadlines and the tentative bloom of cherry blossoms along Manhattan's avenues that offered scant solace against the escalating tensions I'd been harboring since that anonymous threat disrupted the fragile peace of my Brooklyn dinner, prompting me to bolster security measures at Redwood Group while quietly tasking my private investigator with tracing the message's origins amid the ceaseless grind of board preparations for Richard Hargrove's formal pitch, a decision I'd greenlit not out of altruism, but as a strategic arena to confront the web of deceptions his family had spun. All while Miguel's sporadic updates painted a picture of his marriage teetering on reconciliation's edge, with Sophia's remorseful gestures clashing against flare-ups that tested his resolve and mine in equal measure, forcing me to confront whether wielding my professional clout for personal vendettas would ultimately liberate or ensnare us further in cycles of resentment. The morning of the presentation broke clear and crisp, sunlight glinting off the glass facade of our midtown headquarters like a promise of clarity amid the chaos, and I arrived well before the 9 o'clock start. Ensconcing myself in my corner office with panoramic views of the skyline to pore over the due diligence reports that my team had compiled with surgical precision, highlighting not just the merits of Richard's eco-development blueprint, but the glaring red flags from his financial history, including that embezzlement shadow from his previous firm that I'd chosen to withhold from the board temporarily, viewing it as ammunition for a reckoning that balanced justice with the mercy I'd extended at dinner. Though such restraint might irk those rooting for unyielding payback, seeing it as a dilution of the righteous fury Sophia's insult deserved. Richard entered the expansive conference room at precisely 10, his entourage consisting of a perspiring Ethan in a borrowed suit that strained at the seams and a harried consultant clutching a leather folio, while outside the glass walls Sophia paced with Miguel in tow, her unexpected attendance a calculated move to infuse familial pressure that twisted my gut with suspicion. And as the projector hummed to life displaying renderings of verdant subdivisions integrated with solar arrays and rainwater harvesting systems that echoed Redwood's commitment to sustainable urban expansion, I observed from my seat at the head of the polished walnut table, interspersing the presentation with incisive queries about scalability and environmental impact assessments that chipped away at their confidence, particularly when I circled back to funding sources and Richard's evasive pivot to strategic partnerships betrayed the desperation underpinning his venture. A house of cards reliant on our endorsement to stave off personal bankruptcy whispers I'd gleaned from discreet channels. The first ripple of revenge crested midway through when I signaled my assistant to distribute the enhanced financial analysis, revealing in measured tones how Redwood's algorithms had flagged discrepancies in their investor logs that mirrored patterns from Richard's ousted firm. Framing it as a teachable moment with a dash of humor by quipping that in the world of green deals, even the most ambitious plans could wilt under the heat of scrutiny, much like overripe produce in a neglected garden, the veiled allusion to Sophia's barnyard barb eliciting stifled gasps from the board and a crimson flush across Richard's features, his polished facade cracking as he stammered defenses that only deepened the room's skepticism, delivering a satisfying humbling that dismantled their air of superiority without resorting to outright sabotage, yet leaving the air thick with the promise of more to unfold. Twists unfurled rapidly thereafter as Ethan's fidgeting escalated into an impulsive outburst, blurting that the threatening text had been his misguided handiwork born from overhearing Richard's scheme to exploit my in-law connection for insider bidding intel on a contested Connecticut parcel, a confession that detonated like a grenade in the sterile space, prompting security to intervene swiftly and escort him out amid protests that exposed the Hargrove entitlement as a toxic brew of entitlement and cornered ambition, while Sophia burst through the doors at the commotion, her face a mask of horror that morphed into reluctant admission when pressed, revealing she'd known of Ethan's folly but prioritized family loyalty over disclosure, a betrayal that ignited Miguel's fury as he confronted her in the corridor, their voices rising in a torrent of accusations about trust eroded by secrets and the very prejudices that had poisoned their Thanksgiving table, pulling me into the fray as mediator where I advocated for professional counseling over hasty dissolution, a choice rooted in my unyielding hope for Miguel's enduring happiness that might frustrate onlookers craving a clean severance, viewing it as enabling rather than empowering, yet it stemmed from the hard lessons of my own losses that family fractures heal unevenly and often at great cost. With the board reconvening in subdued murmurs, I steered the outcome toward a provisional partnership offer, extending seed funding contingent on rigorous audits and ethical overhauls that would keep Richard's project afloat, but under our vigilant thumb. My final layered revenge manifesting in this controlled lifeline that granted just enough rope for their ambitions to thrive or tangle fatally, stripping away the illusions of invincibility while allowing a path to redemption if they chose it wisely. The room dispersing with handshakes that carried newfound wariness as Richard met my eyes with a mix of gratitude and defeat, whispering thanks that acknowledged the night's original slight without excusing it. Later that evening, driving through the Rain-slicked streets back to Brooklyn with the wipers slashing rhythmically against the windshield. Miguel rode shotgun in contemplative silence after declining Sophia's pleas to join her at the hotel, his decision to stay with me for the night underscoring the night's toll. And as we shared a quiet meal of leftovers from my freezer, he opened up about the illusions shattered and the tentative commitment to therapy that Sophia had finally embraced, leaving me to reflect on whether this boardroom triumph had truly mended the rifts or merely veiled them beneath layers of obligation, pondering the unresolved threads like Richard's lingering debts that could resurface as leverage or liability. Sophia's potential for genuine transformation amid her pride's remnants, and Miguel's path forward in a marriage forged in fire yet untested by time, the ambiguities settling over me like the persistent drizzle outside, inviting contemplation on the essence of victory, whether it blooms in the sweet release of retribution or withers in the isolation of unforgiven scars, a question that lingers without tidy answers as life, much like a high-stakes deal, continues to negotiate its own unpredictable terms.